Ancient Egypt is undoubtedly one of the civilizations that has inspired the greatest fascination among historians and enthusiasts alike, due to the uniqueness and mystery surrounding its history and culture. The pyramids, the gods, the pharaohs, the mummies, hieroglyphs, sculpture, and Egyptian sciences have all become deeply embedded in the collective imagination, while literature and cinema have further amplified this global fascination. The fact is that ancient Egypt's civilization lasted for more than 3,000 years and saw the reign of over 180 pharaohs, until everything came to an end in 30 BC with the suicide of Cleopatra VII. But who was the first pharaoh in Egyptian history? Where and how did it all begin? Today, scholars believe that the first pharaoh in history was Narmer, whose reign is dated to around 3150 BC to 3075 BC. That is, more than 5,000 years ago. Egyptologists regard him as the unifier of Egypt and the founder of the First Dynasty, as well as the first true king of a fully unified Egypt. Even so, his figure remains a subject of debate and many unanswered questions. Who was Narmer? How did he become the first pharaoh? How did he manage to unify Egypt? To understand the figure of Narmer, we must first ask ourselves other questions and examine the historical context surrounding the foundation of Egypt. To begin with, why Egypt? What was so special about this land that gave it rise to one of the most extraordinary civilizations of the ancient world? The answer to this question was already given by the Greek historian Herodotus of Halicarnassus in the 5th century BC. Egypt is the gift of the Nile. The truth is that the Nile is an extraordinary river, offering unique characteristics that allowed the Egyptians to thrive as they did. Nowhere else on earth can you find a river like the Nile, and it is precisely its unique characteristics that explain the exceptional nature of Egyptian civilization. Therefore, without the Nile, Egyptian civilization and culture cannot be understood. But why? First of all, the Nile is the second longest river in the world, after the Amazon, as its waters flow across a total distance of 6,853 kilometers. The Nile rises in the mountainous regions of eastern Africa and splits into two main branches, the White Nile, which originates in Burundi, and the Blue Nile, which begins in Ethiopia. On its journey toward the Mediterranean Sea, the Nile flows through the Ethiopian highlands near the equator, where it is influenced by monsoon winds. From late spring through the summer, the monsoon rains drench the region. These are torrential downpours that fill the Nile not only with vast amounts of water, but also with soil. The river's current carries this abundance of water and sediment down to the Nile Valley, arriving by late July and continuing through August, September, and even October. The river's massive floods overflowed the surrounding plains, covering thousands of square kilometers of the valley and delta with layers of fertile silt and mud carried along by the waters. This natural phenomenon no longer occurs due to the construction of the Aswan Dam, but in ancient times it was a crucial event for the prosperity of Egyptian civilization. First, when the Nile's floods receded around November and December, they left behind vast amounts of soil covered in extremely fertile silt, which, combined with Egypt's warmth, allowed crops to grow with remarkable ease. Second, this was a phenomenon that occurred without fail every year. In this way, the Egyptians did not need to let the land lie fallow or fertilize it artificially, as they received fresh, fertile soil at the same time each and every year. As a result, the land was always rich in nutrients and ready for agriculture. Moreover, besides turning the Nile's banks into highly fertile land, these floods occurred gradually and were non-destructive. In other words, the waters spilled over their banks gently, without causing damaging floods. On the other hand, the Egyptians devised a system for measuring the Nile's floodwaters, using structures known as nilometers. These instruments allowed them to determine how much land would be submerged and enriched during the floods, and, consequentially, how much would be available for planting. Nilometers, located along the upper course of the Nile, allowed the Egyptians to predict the extent of the river's floods through markings that indicated the highest levels reached by the waters. As we said, this helped them determine how much land would be suitable for cultivation and, in turn, plan their harvests. If the flood was predicted to be low, they stored surplus grain. If it was abundant, they adjusted their resources accordingly. This ability to anticipate their harvest gave the Egyptians an advantage that even modern farmers do not possess. It allowed them to make informed decisions about storage, trade, and rationing, depending on whether the year promised abundance or scarcity. Such mastery over their environment provided the Egyptians with a level of control that was crucial to the extraordinary development of their civilization. And these were only the agricultural advantages offered by the Nile. In reality, the river provided many other crucial benefits. First and foremost, the Nile was a constant source of fresh water throughout the country. It also served as a vital communication route connecting the north and south of Egypt, functioning like a natural river highway, since boats were the main means of transport for the Egyptians. The river's current made travel from south to north easier, while journeys in the opposite direction, from north to south, relied on sails or animals pulling the boats from the riverbanks. The Nile also offered abundant fishing, which was a major source of food for the Egyptians. Finally, the riverbanks were rich in papyrus plants, which provided the Egyptians with their primary material for writing. In short, the Nile offered exceptional advantages to the Egyptians. These benefits formed the foundation that allowed the inhabitants of the Nile Valley and Delta to thrive, build cities, and ultimately create a civilization that would endure for over 3,000 years. A civilization whose influence on the Mediterranean and the Near East was profound, an influence that undoubtedly continues to resonate to this day. But the main question remains: how did the Egyptian state and its civilization emerge? How did the unification process begin? First, it is important to understand that Egypt was divided into two main regions. To the north lay the Nile Delta, known as Lower Egypt, while to the south was the Nile Valley, known as Upper Egypt. By the Copper Age, in the 4th millennium BC, these territories of Lower and Upper Egypt already shared a common culture, language, and very similar religious practices. Yet they remained divided into numerous small states. Lower Egypt was made up of city-states, that is, cities that functioned as political units controlling a small surrounding territory. In contrast, Upper Egypt consisted of small principalities, which were groups of cities with a central capital that controlled a slightly larger territory than the city-states, though still relatively small. In general terms, Lower Egypt had a more rural character, with fertile agricultural lands stretching along the Nile. Upper Egypt, on the other hand, was more urbanized, with cities such as Tinis, Hierakonpolis, and Nakada experiencing rapid development. During this era of countless city-states and small principalities, which lasted for several centuries, the foundations of Egyptian culture were gradually established. It was also a turbulent period, marked by constant conflicts between these micro-states. It was in this context that Narmer, the first pharaoh of Egypt, appeared. But how did Narmer manage to unify all these independent territories and become Egypt's first pharaoh? To understand this, we must first move forward 5,000 years in time, when at the end of the 19th century, British archaeologists James Quibell and Frederick Green made a fascinating discovery. Among the remains of the Temple of Horus in the city of Hierakonpolis, one of the first capitals of Egypt's First Dynasty, they found a 64 centimeters tall ceremonial pallet, carved from a single piece of siltstone. The pallet was used to mix and apply makeup, such as kohl. which Egyptians applied around the eyes. But what truly makes this palette remarkable are the scenes of warfare carved on both sides. While it might seem like an ordinary makeup palette, it actually holds invaluable insights into the dawn of pharaonic Egypt. In addition, it bears some of the oldest hieroglyphs ever discovered in Egypt and dates from between 3200 and 3000 BC. This palette is commonly known as the Narmer palette, as the figure depicted on both sides, shown larger than the others, appears to be Narmer. His name is indicated by two proto-hieroglyphs at the top of each side, a kind of chisel and a large-eyed fish, possibly a catfish. In this regard, Narmer is unquestionably the central figure of the palette. But what makes this artifact truly remarkable is that it appears to hold evidence of Egypt's unification. The key to understanding this lies in the crowns Narmer wears on both sides of the palette. But how is that possible? The fact is that Egyptian pharaohs were fully aware that their kingdom was divided into two distinct regions, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Acknowledging this duality, they designed crowns to symbolize each region. Thus, when a pharaoh wanted to present himself as the ruler of the Nile Valley or Upper Egypt, he wore a tall, narrow, stylized white crown. To represent his authority over the Delta or Lower Egypt, he wore a shorter, dark reddish crown with more intricate details. When a pharaoh wished to show that he ruled over both regions, he wore a combined crown, merging the white crown of Upper Egypt with the reddish crown of Lower Egypt. Thus, on the Narmer palette, we see the same figure, Narmer, wearing both crowns. On one side, he appears with the crown of Lower Egypt, on the other, with that of Upper Egypt. We know it is the same individual because the proto-hieroglyphs spelling the name Narmer appear on both sides of the palette, leaving no doubt that both images represent the same ruler. But let us now take a closer look at the reliefs themselves. On the front of the palette, a single battle scene unfolds. Narmer is depicted raising his war mace, ready to strike an enemy he grips by the hair. At his feet lie two other men, either dead or desperately trying to escape his fury. Behind the king stands a bald attendant holding his sandals, while in front of him and above the defeated enemy, the god Horus appears, overseeing the victory and blessing it by delivering more captive foes for Narmer to strike down with his mace. In contrast, the reverse side of the palette presents several scenes. At the bottom, we see a bull breaking through the walls of a city with its horns and trampling its enemies beneath its hooves. Historians believe the bull may be a symbolic representation of King Narmer himself. Above this scene lies the largest carving on this side of the palette, showing two men restraining and intertwining the serpent-like necks of two mythical beasts. These creatures have often been interpreted as representations of Upper and Lower Egypt. In this reading, the scene would symbolize Narmer's dominance over two untamed realms, the Delta and the Nile Valley. However, in reality, nothing in this section conclusively supports this interpretation, and its meaning has not been definitively deciphered by scholars. Finally, at the top, we see a particularly violent scene. Here, the monarch appears with the name Narmer inscribed in hieroglyphs and wearing the crown of Lower Egypt, indicating his rule over the Nile Delta. Once again, an attendant stands behind him holding his sandals, while ahead of the king march 5 members of his retinue carrying standards. Ahead of them lie 10 decapitated bodies with their heads placed between their legs. They're undeniably the defeated enemies of Lower Egypt. In this way, what the palette seems to suggest, although we cannot be certain, as it contains almost no text beyond the name Narmer, is that a prince from Upper Egypt, that is, from the Nile Valley, succeeded in subduing the rest of the valley. This is reflected on the side of the palette, where Narmer is shown wearing the crown of Upper Egypt. Then, as depicted on the other side, that same ruler went on to conquer and bring under his control the city-states of Lower Egypt, symbolized by his wearing of the crown of that region. If this interpretation is correct, it would mean that we are looking at the first ruler to unite and reign over both lands of Egypt. In other words, the first pharaoh in history. This theory aligns with the evidence, which indicates that Upper Egypt was the wealthier region, and that over time its prosperity enabled it to gradually absorb the lands of Lower Egypt in order to secure the resources needed to support its growing population and expand trade. Researchers believe that Narmer was a prince of Upper Egypt because his depiction on the palette wearing the crown of the Nile Valley is the largest and most prominent. It is also notable that the palette was discovered in Nekhen, a city at the very heart of Upper Egypt. Alongside these clues, other archaeological evidence lends support to this theory. Yet the Narmer palette presents a significant challenge, as prior to its discovery, scholars had assumed that the first pharaoh of Egypt, the one who brought together the north and the south, was a king known as Menes, as recorded in the ancient Egyptian king lists. For instance, the Abydos king list, which dates to the 13th century BC during the reign of Seti I, records the pharaohs who came before him. The very first name on this list is Mene. Another key source is the Turin Royal Canon, a papyrus written in hieroglyphic script, that is, the simplified form of hieroglyphs used for writing on papyrus. Compiled in the 13th century BC during the reign of Ramesses II, it identifies Menes as the first pharaoh of the First Dynasty. Although it lists earlier rulers, these figures are generally believed to be gods or mythical kings, as no archaeological evidence of their existence has ever been found. In addition, Manetho, an Egyptian priest and historian writing in the 3rd century BC, composed the Aegyptiaca, which means the history of Egypt. In the Aegyptiaca, he organized Egypt's long past into dynasties, from mythical origins to the conquest of Alexander the Great. His system of division has been largely accepted and adopted by modern Egyptology. Although the original work has not survived, it has reached us through quotations by later authors, such as Flavius Josephus in the 1st century AD. According to Manetho's Aegyptiaca, the first pharaoh of Egypt was Menes, whom he described as the king who united Upper and Lower Egypt. He also mentions Narmer either as a ruler who preceded Menes or, in some versions, as a figure closely associated with him. The exact relationship between Narmer and Menes, according to Manetho, remains unclear. This raises a key question. Was Narmer truly the unifier of Egypt and its first pharaoh, or did that honor belong to Menes? At the end of the 19th century, the Egyptologist Flinders Petrie offered a compelling answer to this question, as Petrie was the first to associate Menes with Narmer, arguing that they were, in fact, the same ruler. According to him, Menes was an honorific title meaning the one who endures, while Narmer was the king's personal name. The name Menes has also been linked to Hor-Aha, the ruler who succeeded Narmer. However, this does not pose a serious problem, since Hor-Aha may have adopted the same honorific title upon ascending the throne, inheriting it from his father. On the other hand, what stands out is the absence of concrete evidence for Menes beyond the royal lists. In contrast, several inscriptions and artifacts directly linked to Narmer have been discovered, offering tangible archaeological proof of his reign. In any case, the evidence seems to indicate that Narmer and Menes were, in fact, the same king. While some scholars continue to reject this theory, it is supported by the majority of experts. Therefore, according to this hypothesis, Narmer was the personal name of the man, while Menes was the name he took upon ascending the throne. Thus, Narmer united Upper and Lower Egypt, becoming the ruler of both lands, and, in the process, earning the title of the first pharaoh. Yet what kind of ruler was he, and what did he accomplish during his reign? The truth is that very few archaeological and documentary sources shed light on these questions, but this is what we do know about Narmer. As mentioned earlier, there are other artifacts and inscriptions in addition to the Narmer palette that reference him. For example, alongside the discovery of the palette, a ceremonial mace head attributed to Narmer was found, as his name is inscribed on it. On the mace head, Narmer is depicted wearing the crown of Lower Egypt, in what appears to be either a procession or a wedding, an aspect we will revisit later. A statue of a baboon has also been discovered, with Narmer's name carved into its base. Although its exact interpretation remains unclear, it is believed to represent Pharaoh Narmer in the form of a baboon, an animal associated in Egyptian mythology with the god Tot, deity of wisdom, writing, the arts, sciences, and the moon. This connection to Tot may suggest that the statue carried symbolic meaning related to the pharaoh's wisdom and divinity. In addition, Narmer's name has been found inscribed on seals, building facades, and pottery fragments, among other objects. The exact length of Narmer's reign is unclear due to the lack of archaeological evidence, though estimates suggest it may have lasted anywhere between 30 and 62 years. His reign is generally placed sometime between 3173 and 2987 BC. Archaeological evidence also suggests that it was during Narmer's rule that the Egyptian presence in Canaan reached its peak. According to Manetho, as cited by Eusebius, Menes led a foreign expedition and earned renown. On the other hand, Narmer's Serech has been identified at as many as 9 sites. In Egyptian hieroglyphs, a serech is a rectangular frame representing the facade of a palace with niches or doors, and typically topped by the falcon of Horus, signifying that the text within denotes a royal name. The serech was the first convention used to distinguish the royal name in the iconography of ancient Egypt. For example, Narmer's inscription on the Narmer palette is contained within a serech. In addition, as part of his consolidation policy, Narmer founded the city of Memphis, which would grow in importance over the centuries and eventually become the capital of Egypt. The city was strategically located near the Nile, right at the border between the delta and the valley. For this reason, Memphis was nicknamed the balance of the two lands. Its position also made it easier to control important trade routes to Sinai and Canaan. To understand the importance of Memphis, it helps to know that its ruins lie only 20 kilometers from Cairo, the current capital of Egypt, and that Giza was one of its necropolis. Herodotus, in Book 2 of his Histories, explains that, according to oral tradition passed down by Egyptian priests, Narmer built a dam to redirect the flow of the Nile. At the time, the river ran through vast sand dunes toward Libya, flooding the surrounding land and turning it into swampland unsuitable for agriculture. Using a system of dikes and a canal, Narmer successfully diverted the waters southward, approximately 18 kilometers north of where Memphis would be founded. After redirecting the river, Narmer founded the city of Memphis on the plain. The city was situated in the narrow part of Egypt, between the Nile to the east and a lake that the first pharaoh had constructed to receive water from the river. Researchers believe this artificial lake corresponds to Lake Moeris, widely regarded as the world's first man-made lake. Truth is that Narmer is recognized for undertaking major engineering projects, including the construction of dikes and canals to control the flow of the Nile, as we have already mentioned. These projects were intended to control the river's flow, safeguard the land from floods, and ensure that water was properly distributed for agriculture, which was vital for the survival of the country. During his reign, Narmer also launched expeditions into the kingdom of Kush, in what is now Nubia. He founded the city of Shedit, today called Al-Fayoum, near Memphis, and, according to Herodotus, constructed a grand temple to Ptah in Memphis. Another important discovery is the presence of the names of Narmer and Hor-Aha in what is believed to be the tomb of Neithotep. This led Egyptologists to conclude that she was Narmer's wife and queen, and the mother of Hor-Aha. The name Neithhotep means Neith is satisfied, which suggests that she was a princess of Lower Egypt, as Neith was the patron goddess of Sais in the Western Delta, the very region Narmer conquered to complete Egypt's unification. It is therefore likely that this was a political marriage intended to consolidate the union of the two regions of Egypt. This brings us back to Narmer's mace head, whose reliefs may, according to one theory, commemorate his marriage to Neithhotep. As an interesting aside, Neithhotep is considered the earliest non-mythical woman, that is, a woman who truly existed, whose name has survived to the present day. Moreover, her elaborate tomb suggests that she may have been more than just the king's wife. In this regard, some scholars have proposed that she could have been the first female pharaoh in history, since she may have ruled Egypt during the minority of her son Hor-Aha. Her name, inscribed in the seraph frames from the period, supports this idea, along with other inscriptions. Even so, there is still insufficient evidence to confirm this hypothesis. And what about Narmer's tomb? Has it been found? Narmer's tomb has indeed been located at el-Ka'ab, near Abydos in Upper Egypt. It consists of two chambers lined with mud brick, identified as B17 and B18. The tomb is situated next to those of Hor-Aha, his successor, and of Ka, who likely ruled Upper Egypt shortly before Narmer. Because the tomb is over 5,000 years old and has been repeatedly looted since antiquity, almost nothing of great archaeological value has been recovered. Evidence of looting is clear, yet remarkably, some artifacts have still been found. These include inscriptions on wood and bone, sealed impressions, and dozens of flint arrowheads. Flint knives and a fragment of an ebony chair leg were also discovered, all of which may have been part of the original funerary assemblage. However, despite the excavation of the tomb, Narmer's mummy has never been found, and there is no conclusive evidence regarding its whereabouts. The absence of a well-preserved mummy is likely the result of centuries of disturbance and looting, as the tomb has been repeatedly robbed and disrupted from ancient times to the modern era. In any case, the evidence suggests that Narmer was the founder of Pharaonic Egypt, becoming the first ruler to unite the Nile Valley and the Delta under a single authority, wearing both crowns and thus becoming, for future generations, the first pharaoh in history. Nevertheless, it is important to note that the country was not truly unified until the reign of Khafre around 2700 BC, roughly 400 years after Narmer's rule. Khafre was the last king of the Second Dynasty. During this 400-year period, the integration of the two halves of Egypt remained weak. The Egyptian state did not yet function smoothly, and although the two regions were united under a single ruler, a true political and administrative union had not yet been achieved. During these centuries, there were frequent rebellions and attempts at independence by some territories, meaning that Egypt's unity depended on constant military campaigns to suppress their uprisings. Therefore, it wasn't until 4 centuries after Narmer's reign that Egypt finally enjoyed genuine political unification. However, the division between Upper and Lower Egypt would reappear throughout the history of ancient Egypt, giving rise to what are known as the intermediate periods. But that is another story, perhaps for a future video. Be that as it may, around 3100 BC, Narmer unified Egypt for the first time and became the first pharaoh of the First Dynasty. His reign marked the beginning of 3,000 years of history, spanning over 170 pharaohs and 31 dynasties. The fascinating story of Egypt cannot be understood without a few key figures, and Narmer is undoubtedly one of them, for his name and legacy have endured through the millennia, so much so that more than 5,000 years later, he is still remembered. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, Please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future episodes. Until next time.